For more than 3 years, a white steel tank sat on a quiet farm property in Lenawee County, Michigan. Workers walked past it. Trucks rolled by it. Seasons changed around it. Nobody touched it. Because nobody realized that this ordinary piece of farm equipment, sealed shut, silent, rusting under the open sky, held the answer to one of Michigan's most haunting disappearances. Her name was Dee Ann Warner, 52 years old. A mother, a grandmother, a self-made businesswoman respected across her county. On the night of April 24, 2021, she vanished from her own home without a trace. Her phone went dark. Her bank accounts froze in place. Her social media fell silent forever. And not a single camera, anywhere, ever captured her leaving that property. For 3 agonizing years, her family begged for answers that never came. And then, on August 17, 2024, investigators walked onto a property on Paragon Road with a search warrant, and they headed straight for the tank. What they found inside would shatter a family's heart, stun a community, and ultimately seal a husband's fate. Stay with me. This one is unforgettable. To understand this story, you first have to understand Dee. She was born Dee Ann Hardy in the summer of 1968, and she grew up in Michigan farm country, a world where your word was your bond, your neighbors were your safety net, and hard work was practically a religion. People who knew her all described the same thing: a small woman with an enormous presence. Dee built her life with her own 2 hands. She raised her children. She helped build and run businesses in the trucking and farming world. She became the kind of person a small community leans on, sharp with numbers, generous with her time, and absolutely fierce about her family. Friends said that when Dee walked into a room, you knew it immediately. Home was a farm on Munger Road in Franklin Township. Open fields, big skies, long gravel driveways, and quiet nights. It's the kind of place where people still leave their doors unlocked. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody. And it is exactly the kind of place where a grown woman is not supposed to be able to simply vanish into thin air. Dee shared that farm with her second husband, Dale Warner, a well-known local farmer. Together they had a blended family and business interests that tied their lives tightly together. Land, trucking, equipment, money. On the surface, it looked like a solid, prosperous Midwestern partnership. But according to the people closest to Dee, the surface was hiding something much darker. Behind closed doors, witnesses would later say, the marriage was unraveling. Dee's daughter, Rickle, would eventually testify that her mother's relationship with Dale was, in her exact words, extremely toxic. Not cold, not distant, toxic. And in the months before Dee vanished, that toxicity, family members said, was building toward a breaking point. Relatives testified about controlling behavior. Prosecutors and family members alleged that Dale monitored Dee's movements, that a tracking device had even been placed on her car. There were allegations of stalking and of domestic violence inside that farmhouse. Dale denied any wrongdoing, but Dee's brother, Greg Hardy, later admitted the warning signs were all there. He simply didn't recognize them in time. And then there was the money. Dee wasn't just a wife on that farm. She was a businesswoman with her own stake, her own accounts, and her own hard questions. According to her family, in the spring of 2021, Dee had grown deeply concerned about the finances she shared with her husband. Serious concerns. The kind of concerns you eventually confront someone about, face to face. People who loved Dee say she had grown uneasy in those final weeks. Relatives later said she was preparing to demand answers about the money, and that she was genuinely afraid of what might happen when she did. On April 24, 2021, whatever had been building inside that farmhouse on Munger Road reached its final night. April 24th was a Saturday. By every outward appearance, it was an ordinary spring evening in Lenawee County. But sometime in the darkness between that night and the morning of April 25th, everything about Dee Ann Warner's existence simply stopped. Her phone activity stopped. Her bank cards never touched again. Her social media accounts silent, permanently. Think about what that actually means. In 2021, a person's phone is practically an extension of their body. Dee's went dead and stayed dead. There were no goodbye messages, no withdrawals of cash, no missing vehicle that could explain an escape, and most damning of all, not one security camera anywhere ever recorded Dee Ann Warner walking off that property. Not one. The next evening, April 25th, 2021, Dee's adult children did the thing no child should ever have to do. They contacted the Lenawee County Sheriff's Office and reported their mother missing from the home she shared with Dale Warner. The search for Dee Ann Warner had officially begun. Nobody imagined it would last more than 3 years. From the very beginning, investigators had to weigh the husband's account. Dale reportedly told authorities that Dee had simply left, walked away from the marriage, from the farm, from her entire life, on her own 2 feet. No note, no destination, no trail. The people who actually knew Dee refused to believe a single word of it. A devoted mother of grown children, a grandmother, a businesswoman with money, property, and deep roots in her community, walking into the night with no phone, no cash, no car, and never once reaching out to her family again? Her loved ones said it plainly, over and over. Dee would never abandon her children and grandchildren. Somebody, they believed, was lying. So the county searched. Deputies canvassed the area. Volunteers walked the fields in long, slow lines. Search dogs worked the property edges and the fence rows. Tips trickled in, and every single one of them led nowhere. Weeks became months. The missing person flyers faded in gas station windows. And on the farm on Munger Road, life somehow just went on. But Dee's family refused to let the case go quiet. They hired private investigators. They brought in an investigative attorney, Billy Little Jr., to push the case relentlessly. They put up billboards along Michigan highways. They offered rewards for information. And her brother, Greg Hardy, made a public promise he intended to keep. He would never stop, never, until he found his sister. Slowly, the case spread far beyond Lenawee County. NBC's Dateline covered Dee's disappearance in its Missing in America podcast. Investigation Discovery aired an episode about her case, titled Vanished in the Heartland. Millions of strangers across America now knew Dee Warner's name and face. But attention is not evidence, and Dee was still out there, somewhere, waiting to be found. In August of 2022, the investigation changed hands. At the sheriff's request, the Michigan State Police took over the case, bringing state-level resources, forensic specialists, and cold, methodical patience. Quietly, far from the cameras, detectives went back to the very beginning. Every statement, every phone record, every timeline, every inconsistency in every story they had been told. By August of 2023, the family faced a milestone nobody wanted. They formally asked a judge to declare Dee legally dead. Not because they had given up, but because the estate, the businesses, and the law itself demanded resolution. More than 2 years had passed. No body, no arrest, no answers. Just a tank sitting silently on a farm property that nobody had thought to cut open. But behind the scenes, according to prosecutors, this case was anything but cold. Investigators had reconstructed a digital and financial timeline of Dee's final night, hour by hour. They had re-interviewed witnesses again and again, watching the stories bend. And through it all, they kept returning to one man, the husband, the last person known to have seen Dee Ann Warner alive. Here is the problem every homicide detective in America knows by heart. Proving murder without a body is one of the hardest challenges in criminal law. No remains means no confirmed cause of death, no crime scene, no forensic anchor for a jury to hold on to. Defense attorneys feast on that uncertainty. If prosecutors were going to charge Dale Warner, they needed to be very, very sure. No body prosecutions do succeed in America, but rarely, and only when the circumstantial evidence becomes overwhelming. The digital silence, The financial trail. The behavior afterward. Michigan prosecutors studied cases like these from across the country, weighing whether the mountain they had built was tall enough. In November 2023, they decided it was. On November 21st, 2023, 2.5 years after Dee vanished, the Michigan State Police announced an arrest in her murder. Dale John Warner, Dee's own husband, charged with murder and with tampering with evidence. And they charged him without a body. A bold, high-stakes legal gamble that stunned observers across the state. Dale was arraigned and jailed. He maintained his innocence, and his attorneys prepared to attack a case built, at that point, almost entirely on circumstantial evidence. For Dee's family, the arrest felt like vindication after years of shouting into the wind. But it was incomplete. Because a courtroom can deliver a verdict, but only the earth could deliver Dee home. Then came August 17th, 2024. Investigators executed a search warrant on a property connected to Dale Warner on Paragon Road. This time, they were not walking fields at random. This time, they knew exactly where they were going. They walked toward a large mobile storage tank, an anhydrous fertilizer tank similar to a residential propane tank. It had been resealed. They cut it open. Inside that tank, investigators found human remains, wrapped in a tarp and bound with duct tape. The identification confirmed what everyone feared and everyone needed to know. After 3 years, 3 months, and 24 days, Dee Ann Warner had finally been found. She had been hidden in plain sight. On farm property, inside a sealed steel container that people had walked past, driven past, worked around, for years. The cruelty of it staggered even veteran investigators. While her family plastered highways with billboards and begged the public for help, Dee was right there the entire time. The news tore through Lenawee County like a storm. In the small towns around Franklin Township, people who had prayed at vigils and shared missing posters now stood in disbelief. This wasn't a stranger's crime in a big city. This was here, a neighbor, a farm they drove past on the way to work. Small towns don't forget things like that, ever. For the family, the discovery was both shattering and clarifying. The searching was over. The wondering was over. The last cruel flicker of false hope was finally extinguished. Now there was only one question left, and it no longer belonged to the family. It belonged to 12 jurors. Who put Dee Ann Warner inside that tank? The trial of Dale Warner opened on February 12, 2026, in Lenawee County, nearly 5 years after Dee vanished. The gallery filled every single day. Court TV covered it. True crime followers across the country watched the live streams, hour after hour. And one by one, the people who loved Dee Ann Warner walked to the witness stand. Dee's daughter Rickle testified about the marriage, describing it to jurors as extremely toxic, and recounting the fear that had crept into her mother's final months. The jury heard the allegations of tracking devices, of controlling behavior, of a woman quietly preparing to confront her husband about the money, and never getting the chance. The lead detective, Daniel Dreyer of the Michigan State Police, walked the jury through years of investigation. The digital silence, the timelines, the interviews, the slow accumulation of detail that led to an arrest before a body was ever found. The medical examiner testified about Dee's remains and the findings on her cause of death. Brick by brick, the prosecution built its wall. And then, on February 24th, the state presented its most devastating piece of evidence: the tank itself. Jurors examined the mobile fertilizer tank where Dee's body had been concealed. The reseal, the confinement, the cold, deliberate engineering of a hiding place meant to last forever. Some exhibits speak louder than any witness ever could. The defense fought hard. There was no eyewitness, they argued, no confession. They told the jury the state's story was stitched together from assumption, resentment, and circumstance. It is the oldest battle in American criminal court, a mountain of circumstantial evidence on one side and the words "beyond a reasonable doubt" on the other. The jury retired to deliberate. March 10, 2026. The courtroom filled one last time. Dee's family gripped each other's hands and held their breath. The verdict: guilty. Guilty of second-degree murder. Guilty of tampering with evidence. After nearly 5 years of silence, 12 jurors finally said out loud what Dee's family had believed since the very first morning. There were tears in that courtroom. The kind of tears that come from a grief that has waited years for permission to let go. Greg Hardy had kept the promise he made to his sister. The billboards, the investigators, the attorneys, the refusal to stay quiet. All of it had mattered. Dee had been brought home, and now the truth had been spoken. On May 7, 2026, Dale Warner returned to court one final time for sentencing. The judge handed down 60 years in prison for the murder of Dee Warner and 10 more years for tampering with evidence to be served consecutively. 70 years. Dale Warner will almost certainly spend every single remaining day of his life behind bars. Think about the arc of it. The man who once told investigators that his wife had simply walked away into the night was convicted of hiding her body in a welded steel tank on his own property. While her family searched, while billboards begged for answers, while the entire country watched. Any appeals will now grind through the courts for years. The conviction stands. There is one detail in this case that will never let go of the people who followed it. Relatives said Dee had grown afraid in her final months, that she was preparing to confront her husband about money, that on some level, she sensed danger closing in. When someone tells you they are afraid of a person in their life, believe them. Believe them the first time. Dee Ann Warner was so much more than a case number or a true crime headline. She was a mother who built businesses in farm country with sheer will, a grandmother, a sister, a loyal friend. Her story passed through a place of unimaginable darkness, but it was carried back into the light by people who simply refused to stop loving her. The Warner case will be studied for years to come. A no-body prosecution that became a conviction, a family that outlasted the silence, and a chilling reminder that in quiet small towns, the darkest secrets can sit in plain sight, rusting quietly under an open Michigan sky, waiting for someone brave enough to look inside. If this story moved you, take one thing from it beyond the shock. If someone in your life is being controlled, monitored, isolated, or made afraid, help them find a safe way out. In the United States, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. One phone call, made in time, can change the ending of a story like this one. Our thoughts remain with Dee's children, her grandchildren, her brother Greg, and everyone who fought for 3 years, 3 months, and 24 days to bring her home. They never stopped. They never went quiet. May they finally have some measure of peace. If you want more real cases told with care, the disappearances, the investigations, the verdicts that take years to arrive, subscribe and turn on notifications because these stories deserve to be told properly. And tell me in the comments, which case should we cover next? Until then, stay safe, look out for the people you love, and never ignore the quiet warnings.